here I've encapsulated on one PowerPoint slide the relevant points on climate change with respect to the political declaration for the upcoming United Nations Summit on the Sustainable Development Goals. So this declaration is worse than a nothing declaration. It's a declaration which enables governments in partnership with banking corporations, the big banking corporations, the big fossil fuel energy corporations, to continue wrecking the planet and leaving an unlivable future. I mentioned that the term unlivable future is actually used by the sixth assessment of the IPCC, saying that we had a rapidly closing window to secure a livable future by taking emergency action on climate change, and that action was specifically explained and recommended by the sixth assessment as immediate and rapid decline in global emissions. But there's absolutely nothing in the declaration that refers to actual measures. The summit is to review the progress, and the declaration acknowledges there's next to no progress, and accelerate the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so I'll just repeat here that they recognize that all countries, that's good because it's definitely all countries now, and of course that's particularly developing countries, which we have always known right from the start. So we're all vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. They emphasize that mitigation and adaptation to climate change represent an immediate and urgent priority. Good. We need to get the immediacy out there because I can't believe it, but despite it being recommended by the IPCC, the word immediate and the recommendation of immediate decline of emissions is absolutely not out there. And so the impacts of climate change are becoming, as they say, more pronounced. They're accelerating, they're getting worse, faster. The crisis of climate change and its impacts. This is where they make a list of the impacts, which is good, including persistent droughts, extreme weather events, land loss, land degradation, sea level rise, coastal erosion, ocean acidification, and the retreat of mountain glaciers. That is definitely more than enough to know that action on reducing global emissions has to be immediate and emissions must go down rapidly. And so indeed, they stress the urgency of enhancing ambition for climate change action. And so they say we commit to continuing our work to accelerate our action to address climate change. The work that they have done has only been to obstruct measures of mitigation on climate change. It's over 30 years since the governments of the world recognized the very serious global warming and climate change, and they recognized that rapid action decades ago would have to be taken. Here's the nasty one. Here's the one that sabotages everything. We recommit to the promotion of a universal rules-based, non-discriminatory, open, fair, inclusive, equitable, and transparent multilateral trading system with the World Trade Organization at its core and trade liberalization. The key word is really non-discriminatory here. And what it says is that governments are not allowed to discriminate against the profit-making of corporations. That's what it means. David C. Corton wrote his great book, When Corporations Rule the World, with this handover of the rights of corporations to sue governments for governments applying their legitimate protection policies for socio-economic and environmental matters. This little phrase that always gets in somewhere, that this phrase on so-called free trade is dynamite to preventing any action on catastrophic global climate change and thereby ensuring an unlivable future, a world in catastrophic climate breakdown. A very apt word that has already been used this year by Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And so I put my conclusions in blue. So the political declaration here changes nothing. status quo continues, the status quo of fossil-fueled, unsustainable world economy, the unsustainable free market I've just referred to, economics, in which money has power over rights and values, particularly environmental protection values. So while, yet again, leaders commit too much, commit, there are no specific actions on climate. There are no climate solutions in this declaration. There is no mention of fossil fuels, no mention of emissions, nor even the targets and limits not mentioned, and the long-promised financing to vulnerable countries. They've been avoiding the agreements to assist the most vulnerable and least developed countries. There's nothing on carbon tax. There's nothing on fossil fuel subsidies, which are now amounting, according to the IMF, to $7 trillion a year. $7 trillion a year. They're going up and up and up. There's no mention of the climate emergency, let alone a code red emergency. There's a lot of disaster risk reductions. This word is used over and over again, but nothing on emissions. So the disasters will get worse and worse and worse. And so risk reductions mentioned over and over means absolutely nothing. So it says that the Sustainable Development Goals are in peril. Well, what is in peril is us. It's the planet which is in the most dire peril. We've known that our economics, that our unsustainable course puts the planet in peril. We knew that decades ago. So right now, all of humanity is in dire peril, and all of life is in dire peril. The whole future is in peril. And that's because we are in now climate catastrophe, climate breakdown. We have had unprecedented extreme events worldwide, particularly involving right across the northern hemisphere. We've had those for several years now. 2022 was a record terrible extreme disastrous events, and also this year, 2023, the very worst of many terrible events with terrible loss of life, displacement, etc. But the very worst is in my country, the Canadian forest fires, which are still burning and still increasing. And that is a global climate catastrophe. As I say, this nothing declaration allows corporations and governments to continue with the planetary destructive catastrophic status quo. And so, our governments continue to doom our future. Yeah, don't say doom. I've heard that for many years. But our governments, working in complicit with the fossil fuel corporations, who of course have known about climate change right from the beginning, and who have been criminally active in the most evil manner to obstruct any progress on climate change mitigation. So our governments, with their huge subsidies, many trillions of dollars, with the fossil fuel corporations and with the big banking corporations, they are dooming our future right now. There's nothing in this declaration to change that.